This is Marlene with Miami Ghost Chronicles, and I want to welcome you to another episode of Stories of the Supernatural. Wherever you find us, whether it's a video or podcast on your favorite platform, please like and subscribe to us so that you can get notification of when a new show is released. You can also find us on major social media platforms. If you go to miamighostchronicles.com, you can find links to the videos or MP3 files, which you can download and enjoy without commercial interruptions. If you're into classic horror, ghost, and adventure stories, I narrate Nightshade Diary, and you can find links at nightshadediary.com. If scary stories are your bag, and listening to encounters with cryptids, ghosts, dogman, and other weird creatures sends a shiver up your spine, then go to supernaturalstorytime.com for links to our weekly podcasts. Noteworthy news about the paranormal world, true crime, conspiracy stories, and anything that is just plain weird can be found at eerie.news or visit the Stranger Than Fiction Stories tab at miamighostchronicles.com. Please subscribe to my newsletter on Substack. Just go to mppelliser.com for a link. I want to thank you for being part of my audience, and I think you are all wonderful. Hi, how's everybody doing? Good, I hope. Everything is good here. Same thing. Like I say many times, dull is underrated. Dull is good. Believe me, there's times when you're like, man, I would give anything to have just a few dull days. But yeah, everything is good over here. I know people ask me, how are the chickens? How are the keats? Well, for those who don't know what that is, a keat is a guinea chick. And because last week I mentioned that I had some egg. Telling you, things that we do for these animals. I basically climbed up a 10-foot burn pile having on the property because this is where this guinea decided to lay eggs. And I noticed she was up there. And I said, you know what? These chicks, they're gonna fall and we're not gonna. So I rattled it and I got the eggs and I put them in an incubator and I'm down to 3 eggs. Everything else is hatched and I've got them, so I'm running around with that, which is good. The pigeons are doing good. The chicks are doing. I told you I got my dozen because I saw there was a run of baby chicks because everybody's like, okay, I said all right, So, but besides that, like I said, everything is the good. And last week, you know what I said? Look, instead of doing the Progressive Insurance weather report, I said, you know what? Let me talk a little bit maybe about some recent uh, unusual, well, not unusual, but weird stories that are out there, as far as what you call it. Let me see if I can find it here. This story, and I wanted to show it to you guys because, I've always talked about the UFO things, like UFOs real or not real. And this is out of I've read a little bit lightly over the story, but basically it's the headline is the Pentagon fabricated wild UFO evidence for decades. And it's like, so why am I not surprised? Okay, it turns out this is like I'm going to summarize this real quick. For decades, the Pentagon pushed fake UFO stories, and now we know why. It was all a smokescreen, not to protect the public, but to protect their own classified systems. And you know what? In other shows that the subject matter has been UFOs and extraterrestrials and blah 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 blah. And I always made a comment about what if all this stuff about the UFOs and even from starting with I'm not even going to go as far back as ancient aliens. I'm just going to go maybe back to the crash at Roswell. There was always the debate whether it was true, whether it wasn't true, whether it was a weather balloon, blah, 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 blah. And I always said, the conspiracy has always been that it was real and that was a big cover up. And I just wanted to bring that up because it's like, where does the truth lie? Okay, where does the truth lie? As far as this UFO extraterrestrial thing. Send me your comments on what you think is the truth. Is it accurate? Is it underreported? Is it overreported? Is it truthful? Can we go the full Monty with like the X-Files where the government has a hybrid treaty, behind the scenes thing going on with ETs? Or not really? Or is it all made up? And maybe the UFOs are man-made, all these things that we see that people have seen for years. It's not really ET in origin, it's man-made. All right. which would be, I don't know, where does the truth lie? I think that after a while, people kind of lose, like, how's this? I'm not much of a cynic, but unfortunately, this, especially this topic, has made me kind of a cynic as to where exactly the truth lies with that. And this is, or but you know how they always say there's always a but in there somewhere. Where does the truth lie? How's this? Do you trust, if now they came out, and when I say they, I'm going to say government or whoever the department is, or who knows what, who takes us in charge of this, ever came out and said something, said this is the truth? It's like, I think people would be like, are you sure? People nowadays are very, at least me, I'm very like, how's this, very careful about when they say this is the real version, unfortunately. And this is one of these things, this thing with the UFO, and God knows, even when, what was it, back in November, when we had these drones out there by New Jersey and everybody was wigging out, besides the drone, or was these UFOs? I mean, everybody was like, and even now, we're going into so much having to do with, I don't want to say outer space, but because that's a little bit out there, but like we're progressing, is like, how much of this is us? How much of, is there such a thing as ETs, or no ETs at all? I don't know. Put your comment. But anyway, let's get on to the good part. The good part. Who is the guest today on Stories of the Supernatural? This is the first time he's been here. His name is Robert, or Bob Cranmer. He's a former officer in the U.S. Army, served as Allegheny County Commissioner, and was instrumental in a major developmental plan for Pittsburgh. He is also the author of the book The Demon of Brownsville Road, a, a Pittsburgh family battle with evil in their home. In 1988, Bob Cranmer and his family moved into 3406 Brownsville Road, Pennsylvania. The Cranmers seemed fated to own the house. As a young boy, Bob had been drawn to the property, and just when the family decided to move back to Brentwood, it went up for sale. Without a second thought, they purchased the house they had always dreamed of owning. Almost immediately, a series of strange things happened: furniture moving by itself, mysterious footsteps and knocking in the night, and then the appearance of a terrifying, hooded, grim reaper like figure. Before too long, it was said that a demon had a grip on the house and all who resided in it. In the end, the happenings reached such a peak that an exorcist was invited to the haunted property. Ultimately, however, only years of battle and endurance of some of the most horrific paranormal activity ever reported would shake the haunting. But soon the family began experiencing strange phenomena: objects moving on their own ghostly footsteps, unsettling moaning sounds that gradually increased in violence, escalating to physical assaults, and most disturbingly, bleeding walls. Bob and his family, which at that time, his wife and their four children, were under attack from a malicious demon that was conjuring up terrifying manifestations to destroy their tight knit household. They had two choices: leave or draw on their unwavering faith to exorcise the malicious fiend who haunted their home. Bob Cranmer recounts the harrowing true story of the evil presence that tormented his family and the epic spiritual war he fought to save everything he held dear. For over a decade, the house has been exorcised. It is both peaceful and clear of the demon, and now you can stay in the house as a transformed, richly historic B&B. Help me welcome him. How are you doing today, Bob? Oh, there we go.
I just came from checking some folks in, and it is a nice, peaceful place to stay.
Okay.
And one of the reasons I did transform it into a B and B, my life after publishing the book continued to have traumatic events and so on. And my wife and I eventually divorced, and uh, I, I I ended up with possession of the house.
Mm-hmm.
It's such a large mini mansion with one person, so I transformed it into a bed and breakfast,
Okay.
primarily just to demonstrate, because of its reputation, because of the book, that the house, in fact, is clean and peaceful and free of the paranormal now. Well, at least free of the demonic. And
Okay.
um, so that it is, I've had hundreds and hundreds of people stay there and without any incidents. So that's the story. That's my life now.
Okay.
I couldn't help but be intrigued with your intro about UFOs. And,
Yes, yes.
and
I always take a look at that, but go ahead. Yes.
yeah, I mean, I've been invited several times to speak to MUFON conferences, MUFON, the Mutual Paranormal, or whatever it stands for,
Right.
people that follow UFOs and extraterrestrials. And my coming out of this experience, my coming out of what you just read, in actually living with a supernatural being and
Hmm.
interacting with it on a direct basis, day in and day out, with one foot in the supernatural world and one foot in the physical world. I came out of that with not a religious faith anymore. I came out of
Hmm.
it with reality, so that everything that said about the devil and God and demons and angels and Jesus, and it's all true. I
Right.
lived it. I
Right.
experienced it. It's all true. So, with that knowledge that I have, and people can read my book, and I've done my best to describe that that revelation that I went through in coming to the understanding that it's all true. I look upon the UFO and extraterrestrial debate,
Hmm.
and I think there's three ways to look at it. Well, first of all, if these UFOs have been, in fact, observing us and interacting supposedly with mankind since ancient times, why don't they do it now? Why don't they land? Why don't
Exactly.
they show themselves? No, they don't do that. It's always this fleeting vision of some craft, or always something that can't be confirmed. And furthermore, if in fact they are some type of physical being, it is a physiological impossibility for any living being like a human or an extraterrestrial to travel the distances from distant galaxies with the time that's involved to arrive at Earth from anywhere in any
Hmm.
amount of time that would accommodate life. So they're not landing. They're probably not here. Could they be people from the future?
Okay.
Some way mankind has evolved to a point, or progressed to a point, where they know how to go back in time, and yet they can't interact because they could change history if they interacted. Yeah, that's maybe a
Right.
possibility.
Right. Right. That's
But
always
I
what they
think
call that butterfly effect.
the most plausible is, in the Bible, it says very clearly that the devil and its demons were cast out of heaven to the earth. And the devil, Lucifer, is the prince and the power of the air. And after the flood, and after the interaction that demonics had with humans prior to the flood, they're not allowed to have direct interaction with us, so they have to keep a distance. And I believe that 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 the observable, unexplainable UFO sightings all surround the demonic.
Do you
And
think when you say that, and I'm glad you brought that up, Bob, because there's versions of the ET theory, which is that they're inter or intradimensional as far
yeah,
as them traveling.
exactly. And that's
And
what I dealt with,
right,
interdimensional.
and then you see
Yes,
people that even go because I tell everybody, once upon a time UFO and ET was over here, and paranormal and ghosts or anything like that was over here, where people are saying no, these some of these ETs are really demons or demonic in nature.
and when you listen to people that have had close up encounters, it
Hmm.
always comes down to some type of a demonic. You see that,
Yes.
you hear of the symbols on the crafts. There's pentagrams, or there's triangles, pyramids. It's all has some relation to demonic. And I believe that the devil is the prince and the power of the air. That's what it is. And what it does, it fuels people's disbelief in a supernatural God. It says, "Oh, we're just one of many thousands of intergalactic um, civilizations throughout the
Right,
universe, and we're just one of many, and there's no God, and it's all baloney, and they're
right.
here to visit us." No, no, we're it.
Right,
We're it.
and you even get
We're
the
the folk.
version that we are in other words, that the ones that engineered going along those lines of what you're saying, where it's that we're the product. In other words, we were made by the ETs. They engineered or tweaked us,
Yes, exactly.
and and that's why they've stuck. And again, that's kind of like, and I agree with you. Like again, if we go back to this show, Ancient Aliens, which supposedly they have
The
all
guy with
these
the hair,
clues.
Giorgio, and all
Yeah,
that.
right. It's really funny with everybody remembers him. It's because of his crazy hair. Um, I understand some of the premise as far as the mysteries, but it's like, how long are you going to observe us?
That's
It's
right. Land. Come on, do something. What do you want?
yeah, same
You
thing. The
know.
other, the cattle mutilation stuff.
Yeah, it's all demonic. It's
You know
demonic.
that I
This
tell
is demonic.
everybody.
Yeah.
This is a finite animal. All right. I mean, how many times are you going to need a cattle and dissect it or whatever it is they do? Because
And
they
drain all the
say,
blood out of it. Drain all
right,
the blood.
drain all the blood or take out, like they say, which coincidentally is the less desirable parts of the cattle, which is the udders, the like the
The tongue
sexual
type thing.
organs, the
Yeah.
tongue. The stuff that's like, if you had to sell that piece of cattle, that's the what you got left over. And then of course, how many times do you need to do that?
Yeah,
If
it's demonic, and all of this ancient alien stuff. Sure, it's ancient because the demons have been here since the beginning. And
right,
as the Bible points out, prior to the flood, they actually interacted with human beings. And I believe
yes,
they're the ones who are responsible for the building of the pyramids and all types of things that are inexplicable.
yes,
100 pound or 100 million pound rock edifice that's on top of some mountain somewhere that's perfectly carved, and they roll it there on logs. No, no.
no. As a matter of fact, I was looking up recently. I was researching an article. There's a site in Peru, very close to Machu Picchu, and they're saying this was built by, they think, the pre-Incas, but basically these people
Yeah,
did not have the wheel. They didn't have draft animals. They didn't have any of the things. Now they have pieces of stone. They built like a fortress that's close. Cusco was like their capital, and on this hilltop, of all things, it's perched on a hilltop. They built this fortress type of thing with some tunnels, but you could see the stones that were quarried were at least 15 tons. Okay. And somehow and like you said, the way it's engineered and these stones are put together are perfectly, but they did that without the wheel, without draft animal. The only thing they had out there are what they call the alpaca or the llamas. Those are that's
they're,
about
they're
the
not
only.
they're not carrying that
They're
stuff
not
up
going to carry
mountains.
that. And then you think, okay, how did they do that with such precision that even now you go there in the ruins that you can see how well these things are neatly put together. Now, what's really interesting, Bob, along the lines of what you were saying, is that when the Spanish, arrived there and they conquered the Incas, blah 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 blah. The missionaries there, the Catholic missionaries, the Spanish, they built a church. Well, it was a convent and then became a church on the foundations of that. They had what was called, amongst that was called the Temple of the Sun. All right. Now, the Temple of the Sun was considered like the most important religious site for the Incas and all of the what they had dominion over.
Yes.
And they built their church and convent on the foundations of that temple, which, by the way, and I know this people are going to mean, it's like, among the Incas were known for human sacrifice, including child sacrifices. All right. And it makes you wonder, did they build that, a religious, you know, edifice on top of the old foundation, as in to suppress the evil? Let's go down that road. Why not? You know, as it being a place that was used for human sacrifice. because they did
Well,
come down to
I
have
mean
human
that was
sacrifice.
not an uncommon thing.
Yeah.
Many of the Greek um, in Greece, the columned um, uh, temples to the various Greek gods um, were converted into churches by
Yes,
Christians.
I know that many cathedrals even now.
Exactly. And they have the pillars, they still have pillars going down like the center of the church to mimic, um, because they would build out below, out beyond the pillars of the
Right.
temple,
Yes.
to make the churches larger. And so yes, they would.
But
And
getting back to what you were originally saying, this is pre. How did they man? How were they able to get these stones up there? So perfectly, like you were saying. How
well, they
techno?
couldn't do it today. It couldn't be done today.
No, no.
There
That's
are
what I.
things that could not be done today. The pyramids themselves could not be built
Yes.
today,
Like if
even
you had
with
to
the
haul those stones
technology.
way up. Besides that, you have to take them from wherever they were quarried
Yeah,
over there, and then eventually, as your thing is going up, you're going to have to take that up. I mean, I think that if they took some of these engineers and they said, "This is the only thing you got to work with,"
yeah,
a
it couldn't
llama.
be. They couldn't be built today. Those things couldn't be built today. Many of the temples, and I mean these giant stones that were
Hmm.
quarried, um, it just couldn't be done.
Yes.
And it in fact was, who knows how long ago, tens of thousands,
Yes.
thousands and thousands of years ago, it was done. And I believe that during the pre-flood civilization, where you had all of these obelisks all over the world in different locations and
Hmm.
so on. It was a very advanced civilization, and it
Yes.
was from interaction between human beings and the supernatural.
I think that's
And
what's they're realizing that a lot of the dates that they're giving as far as how far back mankind and ancient civilizations that they're off. That
they
they're
don't
off.
know. And
Things are
and and
older.
and once it progressed, and there was such integration between the supernatural beings and humans, God just said, time to start over.
Right. Well,
Time to start over, and that's what happened.
and that's yeah, and I think um that a lot of but and in some cases it's really weird because you have all these like you said these type of temples or big out of and they're in different continents that normally these people as far as is known never had contact among themselves.
But the
Y-
pyramids are everywhere. Pyramids are
Yes.
all over the world.
Yes. Yes, they are.
So,
Yes, they are.
yeah, ancient aliens. Hey, Giorgio, you're barking up the wrong tree. It's all in the Bible.
Let
It's
me tell you
demonic.
something.
It's
It's
demonic.
that Ancient Aliens. I think it has 12. Had I don't think it's still running. What 12 or 13 seasons for it. So yeah, a lot of people. I mean, some of the stuff they presented was I liked it, but
Well,
still it was like
a number of the individuals who are on Ancient Aliens
yes,
are the ones that invited me to come
yes,
and speak at several of these conferences. and
hmm
and and when I got up and I gave my little spiel, which I just did, I didn't know if they would boo me or hiss at me or
it's
but
like get him off
I'll
the
tell you,
stage, get him off the stage.
I brought a box of my books, and before I walked back to the table, my wife said they're all gone.
Wow, there you go. See,
They're all gone.
yeah, it's like yeah, exactly, exactly. Because I think a lot of people out there in the UFO community, once upon a time, like you said, MUFON and everything was strictly scientific, and I know that MUFON did a lot of investigations and blah blah blah, or they would took eyewitness testimony of people that had sighted stuff. Um, but now those things are crossing, the paranormal or even demonic. And I told everybody, I'm sure you're familiar with Skinwalker Ranch, which out there in Utah, in the
Yeah,
Utah Basin, supposedly that originally was bought for basically because of UFO sightings. From what I understand, was that was the original intent of the study. But then later on, they've had a book published. I believe it was by George Knapp and Calum Collar. I can't pronounce his last name correctly. Anyway, Humphrey Skinwalker, where they had paranormal experiences even when they went back home. Pretty intense paranormal investigate experiences. I'm not talking about seeing wolf-like things or cryptid, like very intense. sightings for people that sometimes just worked as security, and they would go back home maybe hundreds of miles away, and they were starting to have extreme paranormal experiences, sightings inside their house, something that they called the hitchhiker effect.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well,
Which,
I had that group come to my house, which is in my book, and really they're the groundbreaking group that really started the whole paranormal genre. The group from Penn State University that
yes,
had the show Paranormal State.
yes,
They were the first ones to have a kind of a ghost hunting television show. Well, they came to our house. They're in the book before they were famous. When they
okay,
were an organizational club at Penn State University, there were about 10 of them that came to the house at the invitation of the Diocese of Pittsburgh to basically validate all the crazy stuff that was happening in the house. And they came
okay,
twice. And the leader of that group, his name's Ryan Buell,
yes,
famous, has a big following. Went on to kind of great fame with that show, but his life really took a turn for the worse.
yeah, derailed,
And
yeah,
from personal conversations with him, and he and I are kind of close. He points to his involvement at our house and
really.
what he dealt with at our house. Yes.
Does as far as what happened to him in his personal life,
And
or
what
from
happened, and it kind of stayed with him.
okay, I understand exactly what you mean.
It stayed
Yes,
with him, and he would refer to it
okay,
in his episodes that this thing was following him.
really.
And so whatever, I don't
Let me
know.
ask you something. When they went there, because I know sometimes groups will go to certain places and nothing happens. It's like, wow. Did when they went there, did they
uh,
experience anything?
the only thing I can say is they, up until that point, we were having a very difficult time
Hmm.
understanding this thing.
Okay.
And they came kind of reckless, but they
Yeah.
had spoken with a kind of a paranormal, I don't want to say medium, a paranormal, um, you know, a woman that's connected to understanding and being able to discern different paranormal activity.
Okay.
And she was from Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, and she was supposed to come with them
Hmm.
on the first visit to our house.
Okay.
And it was all scheduled. She was going to come, and as I said, about 10 of them came from Penn State. And at the last minute, she said, I can't go there. It's just too dangerous. It's too dangerous. And I recommend that you not go there either, because it can have a lasting impact and do lasting damage to you.
So she told
Uh,
this to Ryan, like,
yeah,
don't
and
go.
his group, yes.
Okay. All right.
And they obviously said, well, we're going. We're
Yeah.
going to go
Yeah.
anyway. So she said, well, when you do go, what you need to do is access the void at the center of the house. That's all she said. You must access the void at the center of the house. So the first thing they asked me when they arrived was, is there a void at the center of the house? And I said, well, yes, there is.
They
And
must have been like,
yeah,
instead of you
what
going, what are you talking about, huh? Okay.
once we accessed the void,
Hmm.
which was basically the domain or the lair, so to speak, of the
Okay.
demonic entity, all hell
Okay.
broke loose. All hell broke loose after that in the house. It just became
What, after,
pandemonium.
even after they left?
When they left, yeah. They
Oh, when
came
they
back a
left?
second time, and
Hmm.
then the church told them, we don't want you to come back anymore because it's just too dangerous for you to be.
Right. You're out of your depth in this.
We don't want you to be involved with the battle against this thing. You did your job. You documented
Right.
what's going on. That's all we want. Thank you very much. And then they went on to their great fame, but Ryan paid a price for it, I
So
believe.
in other words, once they got that feedback from them who had never been there before, I guess the church said, okay, there's got to be something there. And this,
Yeah, in any exorcism, before exorcisms take place, they'll have, say, a psychologist or a doctor, a
hmm
psychiatrist examine the person
right.
that is possessed
hmm
to basically come up with a conclusion. I don't know what's wrong with this person.
Right,
It's
right,
not
right.
mental. This is some deep seated issues that I don't understand. And that's basically what they were doing, because demons can possess objects, they can possess places, localities, and possess people. Well, in our
Sure.
case, they possess the locality, the area that the house was built on,
The land.
the land. Yeah.
Okay. All right. And because I know that, yeah, they do sometimes send in teams because unfortunately, many, many times, some of these claims, they really what is going on is mental illness on the part of the person. So I know they always want to discount that totally. And in some cases, I know you can have both. For example, I know Dr. Richard Gallagher did it for many years for the Catholic Church to verify. And in the book that he wrote when he was getting into that, that basically they were asking him as a professional, can you please interview this person and verify that they're not suffering from some type of mental illness? And he described, because I read his book, where at the very beginning he had a few experiences that were supernatural. He had a hard time, the scientist in him coming to terms
With the
with.
supernatural, yes.
Yeah, no, he he stayed there. He did it for 20 something years. I believe he's not doing it anymore. But yeah, you could tell he describes at the beginning, he had a really hard time coming to terms that the supernatural actually existed.
Well, what's the name of that movie that came out a couple of years ago? Nefarious, I think.
Insidious?
Pardon me?
Insidious?
I think it was
Which one is
Nefarious.
it?
It's the one where the reporter goes into a prison to interview a possessed man. I think it's Nefarious.
It might be nefarious. I'm sorry. Sometimes some of these movie titles are like, what? Hold on.
Yeah, but it was amazing. It was amazing how this thing would go back and forth. Like the true person in the body would come out for a certain period of time
Yes,
and
you're
say,
absolutely right. Yeah,
help
it came
me,
out in
please,
2023.
help me. And then the demon would oppress it again.
You want me to tell you something? What movie? And I don't know if you ever saw The Exorcist, the number three, which George C. Scott.
No.
And it was, if you ever see the number two, because you know how when they do follow-ups to movies, it's like, man, why did you do that? You just left the original movie standalone. Number three, in and of itself, is an excellent because basically it's the same thing. George C. Scott is a detective and he's investigating some murders going on, and who he goes to see in a psychiatric hospital is Father Damien from the original movie, who's being held in a psychiatric hospital. I'm not going to tell you anymore, and I don't know if at this point you would ever want to see the movie, but it's a same thing. People having a hard time when they find themselves in that scenario, actually accepting that this does exist in our world.
Yeah, well, I can attest to it. I can tell you that, what I went through for several years with the actual struggle and the battle in the house.
Mm-hmm.
And then the struggle I went through to write the book and get it published.
Oh, really? Even writing the book, you had a hard time?
Oh, yeah, just to get through it and to get it published. And then after the book was published,
Mm-hmm.
um, it was like outing the mob. Uh, really, I mean,
That's
my
great.
life, my family paid a price. My marriage, failed. It's been somewhat. I could probably write another book just based upon
Well,
my life since.
you
And
know what? now that you bring that up, Bob, let me ask you, since you've had all these, because when you were going through it, you were going through it, but now that you can basically look back at these experiences, maybe starting from when you bought the house, what would your advice be to anybody in a similar situation?
Get away from it. Just get
Okay.
away from it. Um, it's just it's just so powerful and so difficult to deal with. And it can, at one point in my story,
Mm-hmm.
I call it the red pill, blue pill decision,
Okay.
where a senior member of the staff of the Diocese of Pittsburgh said to me, "You have a choice to make. Um, you can move and sell this house to someone else and wish them the best, and we'll bless the house and so on, and you can move on, like the folks who sold it to us did.
I was about to, yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Or you can stay and we can fight this and we'll fight it together." Um, I'm not sure where it will go. This is a powerful entity. So that's your decision. So it's the red pill or the blue pill. So I like what was his name in the Matrix? Neo went
yes.
down the rabbit hole. Yeah, I chose to go down the rabbit hole. I made some mistakes. My family paid a price for it. I've been criticized highly for putting my family through this and not leaving. Um, but I believe that the story is more than a spooky ghost story or a
Mm-hmm.
spooky paranormal story. It really points to the fact of the existence of good and evil, the existence of God and the devil. And I've had many, many more than one people come to me and say, "Listen, I didn't have any faith. I didn't have any belief or understanding of anything religious or supernatural until I read your book." And it really stopped me in my tracks and made me think, because I do now believe that there is. So if that's the price I had to pay to deliver that message, and I think this book will live on long after I'm gone, because there is a message to it. It makes some people, it either verifies what people already believe, it leads them to believe the truth, or it makes them very angry. And I've seen all of it come through in reviews on Amazon, where I'm a great brave hero guy that faced off evil, or I'm a no good rat, you know,
Right, right,
make up stories, put my children and family in harm's way, egotistical. I mean, they'll write paragraph after paragraph about what a bad guy I am.
Do
Um,
you think that the people that sold you the house, did they ever, I don't know, because I imagine that if you have a conscience, like, because basically this is what you just described, like, if I stay here or if I sell this, is this going, do you think that they were ever bothered?
oh, there's no question, and I detail that in my book.
Okay.
Um, when things started happening after we moved in the house, and we initially thought, okay, we bought a haunted house. We bought a house with a spirit, but
Right,
hopefully it's benevolent, and Casper the ghost, and we can live with it. There are a lot of
right,
haunted houses and haunted hotels and things that people,
right,
you know, ghosts are the spirits of people that once lived, and if they're normal people, eh, it's
right,
kind of just something you live with. But the
right.
demonic is something altogether different. So I called the guy a few months after we moved in.
Mm-hmm.
I found a box buried out in the yard near one of the corners of the property that had holy uh, rosary beads and a scapular and some Catholic items in it, and it was not an old box. I could tell it
Mm-hmm.
had been placed there relatively recently. It was like a metal Sucrets box,
Okay.
And I asked him, "Hey, what's this all about?" He said, "Please, just put it back. Put it back where you found it. Bury it where you found it. That's all I'll say." So then years later, after we had gone through everything, and I
Hmm.
was trying to document historic facts about the house and trying to find out and interview previous people who had lived there and what they had experienced, and talking to folks that knew about that. I called the owner again and I said, "Hey, how you doing? Hey, blah blah blah. Talked to him for a while. I did this to the house and that. Hey, you know what?" I said, I kind of would like to get together with you if you wouldn't mind. Have a cup of coffee. And, we'll meet down at the local restaurant. And we've had some really interesting things happen to us in this house over the past few number of years, and I'd like to compare it to what you may have experienced.
I don't think he went to that meeting.
And there was a silence. And he
No.
said, "Let me get back to you."
Sure.
And
And
I never heard from him
are you
again.
still waiting for that phone call, right?
Well, interestingly enough, both he and his wife, both of them, died within 6 months of the book being before the book was published.
Really?
Both of them,
Wow.
both of them died within 6 months of the book being published. And I gave them a fictitious name
Right.
in the book, a last
Hmm.
name that was fictitious. I did talk about my asking him before I bought the house, "Is there anything wrong with this house?" And he said, "Oh, no, there's nothing wrong with the house." You would have thought he would have asked me to clarify what I meant by wrong. But
Sure.
his response was, "Oh, we've had mass in the living room." Now,
That is,
who has mass in their living room?
let me tell you something. I'm going to tell you my own quick story here because I used to do paranormal investigations since the 90s for a really long time. One time we went to this was in Florida. I've always lived in Florida. And we go to an investigation. These people are moving from their house, but they're moving up to North or South Carolina, right? And they're concerned. They don't want whatever was there to
To go
follow
with them.
them. Right. So I said, "Well, what's the background on what happened with you guys?" And they said that when they bought this house, okay, when they move in, it was full of angels. Angels inside, angels outside, angels, 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 angels everywhere. So they went to the real estate agent and they said, "Hey, what's up with all these angels?" And they didn't take them with them. They have statues outside, statues inside. The realtor tells them, she goes, the family that was here they were, I want to say, like born again Christians. I'm not sure exactly what denomination. She says, but she goes, on the day of the closing, I came to pick them up. And she says, and I'm Jewish. And they made me go into a prayer circle before we left for the closing. So she says, and that's the only thing she says, she goes, I went along with it because, oh, that's okay with me. And that was the real estate
So it
agent's.
wasn't taken care of. The issue
Well,
was that.
what it was what they did was basically it took it from inside the house to outside the house.
Oh,
Okay. But that's how they kind of like found out, like, because they saw these angels. The girl told me, she goes, look, there was little angel statues all over the house inside. There was a bunch of angel stuff outside in the yard, everywhere. And we're like thinking, like, why didn't they take these things with them? It must have cost them,
yeah.
some type of money. And again, when they asked the real estate agent tells them, no, she goes, they had to have this prayer and they pulled me in there. And I was like, okay, sure. And she
So,
couldn't.
so the problems continued when the new people moved in.
Yes, yes, it
Yeah.
did. It did.
Oh,
But
welcome to my world.
right. But again, like exactly like what you just described, when you're asking this gentleman, is anything wrong? And he's telling you we had a mass. That's like, what an unusual answer. Okay, well, that's good. That's instead of asking you, what do you mean? I mean, no, the roof is good and the plumbing's good.
Yeah,
What
what
are
do
you
you mean
concerned?
by wrong? He knew right
Yeah,
away what I was
right,
referring to.
right, right, right.
Because
Exactly. Which is
my wife said this house is creepy. I don't like it. I don't want to buy this house. This place is creepy, and that's what led me to ask him that then.
okay. And which is, by the way, which is what normal house buyers are, hey, there's a plumbing good. Is there's a roof leak? That's what most people, when they
Yeah, I
ask that
mean, to say,
question.
is there anything wrong with this house? You'd say, okay, well, what do you mean wrong?
Right.
We talked
Exactly.
about no. She right away. He said, no, no, no. We've had mass in the living room twice.
I'd
Twice.
be, I'd be like, what? And were they Catholic? Just out of
Oh,
curiosity.
they were Irish Catholic.
Okay, all right, but still, let's face it. That to have mass in your house?
Yeah, mass is, like I say, math isn't something they take on the road.
No, no,
I
no, no.
mean,
It's not. No.
now we ended up having mass in almost every room in the house, because it was a weapon against evil.
Sure.
The team of priests that worked with us, we would say the rosary, we would say mass, we would do blessed incense, you name it, we did it.
Right.
Um, but I mean, just to have a priest come to your house and say mass, no,
No.
the church doesn't do that.
Mostly what people have done for houses is like a house blessing. Oh, I'm moving into a
Just
house,
a
and
house
they'll
blessing, that's it.
yeah
And
come
we had
over.
a house blessing when we moved in the house,
Right.
which was interesting in and of itself. Now, again, the book is called The Demon of Brownsville Road,
Yes.
and I really think, and I'm not a aficionado or a great interest in this, demonic stuff, but I have seen the movies. I've seen movies. There's not a story out there, except maybe for the original Exorcist story,
Mm-hmm.
which was based on a true story that
Right.
compares to this, and
Right.
all the different components that go into it, uh, of evil, and the name of the demon we found out, and the fact that there was a grisly murder that took place in basically the front yard of the house back in the 1700s, and the bodies are buried right there in the front yard, and we discovered all this,
See,
and
that's why I mentioned that, Bob, because see, I don't want to say if it's the benefit, but you've lived there for so long. Because you see a lot of these movies, or even stories or books, are people that live at a certain location, maybe a few months or maybe even
a
years.
couple of weeks, yeah.
A couple of, well, let's go with the Amityville Horror. 30 days later, they were out of there.
Yeah.
You know, even if, whether you want to believe it was an actual haunting or not, 30 days later, they're like, we're out of here.
Well, I mean, I was up close and personal with this thing. We would have contests of between each other. I would talk to it. We communicated. I mean, I lived with this thing, and we battled back and forth almost on a daily basis. After I learned how I could make its existence in the house as miserable as it was making ours, and then it
Okay.
just became a battle of wills. So I remember one time my wife and we spent the night in an old hotel that went back to the 1700s, and the staff left, and they said, you're the only folks here tonight. We have to tell you that this place is haunted.
And you,
And I
and you
said,
must have been like, all right,
I
yeah,
said,
okay.
I said, you better tell the ghost that I'm here.
Yeah, I know. That must have been like, okay, all
I said,
right.
I said, let them know that I'm here. Maybe they'll leave.
Let me. That must have been funny. It's like, yeah, all right, okay. It's like dun 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 dun. Dun. It's
Yeah.
like it's gonna be a hard thing to like from where Did you did whatever was there? Did it ever follow you outside the house as far as the premises, or was it bound to the
Not
place?
me. I'll tell you. The one thing I will say is that my daughter
Hmm.
lived in the house for a time with her husband, and she had a newborn, a small baby.
Okay.
And one night, her husband walked into the little nursery room to see this black figure kind of looming over the baby's crib.
Okay.
And that really was one of the first things to kick off the whole situation. Well, I
Right.
moved when that happened.
Hmm.
I moved them out of the house. I rented a house for them a few blocks away, and I
Okay.
moved her and the baby out of the house to this rental property. And
Okay.
and I'll tell you, for about a month, it followed them there. We
Really?
actually had to have the priests that were fighting in our house go to her house and bless her house. And it didn't stay with her, but it did follow her there.
Right. The reason why I ask is that, everybody always thinks typically of hauntings as that it's this one place and strictly, and that this, whatever is there. And sometimes, you hear of them become attached to people, or like what you just described, where
Yeah,
they
I think
kind of
that's
like,
the difference between the demonic and ghosts. I think ghosts, whatever ghosts are, and
hmm
for whatever reason ghosts exist, and maybe it's the Catholic doctrine of purgatory,
right,
that people have to stay in some particular place and time and situation for a period of time before they move on. and
right,
and it's always usually associated with an event or a location or something that they keep reliving. Whereas the demonic, they're just it's like dealing with an invisible person, and
sure,
they'll follow you. and
right,
and and the danger of these ghost hunting groups that take it as some type of an extracurricular activity, a hobby, so to speak.
yes,
You
yes,
don't know what you're dealing with. You
nope,
could be dealing with a ghost of Aunt Martha who lost her son and is looking for her baby, whatever, or
hmm
you're dealing with a demon,
yeah,
and those demons will hurt you,
sure,
and they'll leave with you and follow you.
yes,
And I think that's why it's so dangerous for young children to play with Ouija boards.
yes,
They'll conjure up spirits with those boards that will attach themselves to the people that are
yep.
playing what they feel is playing a game, and it'll affect them for the rest of their lives.
Well, I tell everybody whenever I would get a case, or I would hear, because that they say, "Oh, it's the little kid," I'd be like, "Ugh." I would say I'm very, very, very careful. Anything that's described as a child, I said whatever is very manipulative,
Yeah,
and
yeah. It's you don't know,
because
child.
because what do most human adults do? When you say a child, everybody's guard comes down.
Yeah,
Oh, it's a
they're
little kid.
sympathetic,
Oh my
sympathetic.
God. Yeah.
It's a little
And it's
baby.
a kid or a child. Oh my God. Okay. Poor thing. So whenever it was like, nope, nope, that's not good. But it's a
Kind of like
kid. It's
talking to
like,
some. It's like talking to someone on the internet that you don't
no,
know who they are or where they're at. You know.
exactly. Exactly. And you know what? And when you were talking about, all these paranormal groups, including that, that they do sometimes this provocation or confrontation. I was like, you know what? I know sometimes some of these shows, they're a little bit over the top, and sometimes it's like, but it's like, you know what? Exactly what you just said. You really don't know. For all you know, yeah, it might just be thin air. Who cares?
Well,
But
I
if
know
it's
I
not,
that one ghost hunter group, the guys that yell and carry on and
yeah,
everything. They
yeah,
they had they that show approached me to come to our house, and I
really,
said,
okay.
no way,
God,
no way.
can you
What we
imagine?
what we went through to put a lid on this stuff, I don't want you coming here and opening anything back up again.
God,
So
that would have been, yes, that would have
no
been,
way in the
yes,
world.
yes, and
As if anyone tries to come to that house and ghost hunters, can we
hmm
come to your house and
and
search
you're
for?
like,
No, you
no,
can't.
no, no,
No, you
no,
can't. No,
nope, absolutely
we
not.
don't
I
we
can
don't
imagine.
entertain
I don't
anything
blame you
like
at
that.
all.
Yeah.
I don't blame you at all, because people, it's like, because it's like, a lot of times people don't understand that when they do that provocation, confrontation, basically you're inviting it. You're
Yeah,
you're opening the lines
absolutely.
of communication.
And that's why I mean I always made sure every time I spoke to that thing, I I would talk very strongly and make demands of it, but it always was encompassed not in my authority, but
hmm
in the name of Jesus Christ.
Exactly.
In the name of Jesus Christ, you are going to leave. And through
Right.
his power and his cross and his blood, not through my determination. I'm
Right.
just the vessel here that's being used.
Exactly.
So I always had to make sure that I would preface my statements
And
and end
now,
them with that.
that you mention that, getting back to what we were originally talking about, some people say, hey, that these ETs are demonic in nature. And some people have pointed out, because some people go, oh no, come on, one thing. And some people have said where there's been abductees or contact. Well, but let's say with the abductees, where they do use the name of Jesus Christ. and this repels the ETs. So it makes you think, okay, if you're just an ET from another planet or another dimension or whatever, what would it matter
Yeah,
if you invoke the name of Jesus Christ? It'd be like, well, okay, but no, it repels them, which
naturally.
is
Yeah,
which is
because it's demonic. That's why. It's
because, and that's what people think. This is not the it came from whatever the
you
Pleiades
know
or what all those things.
another thing I think comes from that dimension is
Uh-huh.
Bigfoot. I think Bigfoot
Yes.
some way plays into that as well because these things appear and they disappear.
Yes.
And there's never any signs, there's never anything that they can track. These things appear and they disappear. And I
Yes.
believe there's some form of demonic entity.
Right.
They
And some
from
people,
come through a portal of another dimension.
right, it could be a rip, it could be a portal. Some people, they're one and the same, or, if there's a rip or a portal and if that's opening up, they just skip out like, but a lot of people that track this have found like a spike in UFO sightings, and then it dovetails with a spike in cryptid or Bigfoot sightings. Okay.
There's no question that it's all some way related, and whether it's all the creepy stuff on this Skinwalker Ranch, that's all demonic. It's all demonic, and it only makes sense because it's all documented.
Let me tell you
It's
something.
all documented.
When you read the description, because see, the owners prior to the Shermans, which it was a couple, and they bought the property out there like in the 1930s. They lived out there, and then when they died, it went to the man's brother. He was the one that sold it to the Bigelow, the company. The people that lived out there for like 60 years. Supposedly, you know, the brother said no, they never said anything about, well, not even paranormal, about UFO sightings. They never described anything with UFOs. And then you hear what the Shermans, which were the people that basically bought it for a ranch. All they wanted was just a ranch. That they had all these, I mean, over the top experiences. It's like, were those people not saying anything when they lived here for 60 years? And they just decided to like,
Keep it to themselves. Yeah.
but then again, you hear that piece of land, even according to the Native Americans that lived there, already had that ridge, already had a bad reputation to begin with. So, you know, and then again, is it UFOs or is there something else? Because, like I said, they've seen something like dogmen. They would hear like machinery, sounds like heavy machinery coming out from the underground. I mean, stuff that you're like, what in the world is it? It's not a UFO ET kind of thing. It was incredible.
Hmm.
And even now, I'm sure you've seen that they have that show out there that they can't make head or tails of what's the phenomena that they have going on out there. Basically, I want to laugh real quick. Basically, what was going on with their camera, where I don't know if you've seen all the equipment malfunctions a
Yeah, I
bunch of
mean,
times.
yeah, it plays havoc with electronic equipment.
Yes, yes.
In our house, we would have the clocks would stop and coffee makers wouldn't work, and so many TVs would quit working, and it was amazing.
Right. And again, we get into how much of it, well, of what we understand the nature of it is. Let me ask you, the priest that helped you out, or are they still around? Do they ever check up on you, or?
One of them passed on. The
Mm-hmm.
other two priests, yeah. I keep in pretty regular contact with them.
Okay.
They're up in age, up in years now. The one
Okay.
major guy, he's probably in his upper 80s now,
All
and
right.
he still has a radio show. He has for at least 30, 40 years every Sunday night
Wow.
that I listen to. And then
Okay.
Father Mike Salvagna, he's in Scranton, PA, and we contact each other every couple months. And
Okay.
um, yeah, I mean, the Catholic Diocese of Pittsburgh went public on my story before my book was published, and
I
on
know
their
because.
own, on their own,
Mm-hmm.
verified every. every page of my book and their involvement in it.
Right,
That
because sometimes, unfortunately, you
stood
hear
by the
that
whole thing.
they don't want
So
to talk about stuff like that
as far
because,
as me, just some guy coming up with some crazy story and writing it down, there are just too many other um, notable, uh, reputable people, like the Bishop of Pittsburgh. It said,
right,
yeah, both two bishops of Pittsburgh, both endorsed the book. So
okay.
yeah, it's
Let me
there's
ask you,
plenty
and
of
by this, I'm not going to say your neighbors because, before neighborhoods, there's the place that what you have is land, Usually these are bigger parcels of land before it gets subdivided and built on, etc. Did you ever have any of the people in the church ever tell you that they had similar type of happenings in that location or in that general area within a certain miles, a
Well,
circumference?
there was another house very closely associated with our house, a block
Mm-hmm.
away, and it
Okay.
was very well known as the haunted house of the neighborhood. It sat
Oh,
empty.
okay.
It sat empty for 30 years.
That's pretty haunted.
Yeah, it sat empty. It sat empty from the late 1950s until the 1980s,
Wow.
and it had quite a reputation to it. And
Okay.
my story pulled it all together,
Okay.
and its
Okay.
association with my house and what transpired. And there's the stories in there about the mob and uh, organized crime and just a
Mm-hmm.
lot of evil stuff. Evil begets evil begets evil.
Right, right. And that's why I'm saying, because I know sometimes the church is privy, like you said, people keep things under wraps, but they're privy to certain things happenings in certain houses that you would nobody would ever know. And I'm not talking about the typically haunted house where they could say, you know what, there's a house maybe a mile or half a mile away from here that at one point was part of this area where we know because we're behind the scenes as a church that had very, very similar experience or description. But you're saying that this is just down the block from you then?
Yeah, it's a block away. Yeah,
Wow.
yeah, and
Wow.
it's very closely associated. And yeah, it's a very deep story. Um,
Okay.
all centered around a demon that loved to kill children.
All right. So
And
was
that's what the
do you
book's about.
okay. Okay. Well, you know what I mean that's a whole nother show, but yes, which you find that a lot in you know, that's a common denominator in any type
Yeah, I
of
mean human
yeah, human
sacrifice.
sacrifice, but
Yep.
children, type of invocations or any type of these different cults, whether they call themselves Satanists or they call themselves whatever, that's one of the common denominators that you find is human sacrifice, or
Well, the
especially
name
with
that we were
children.
given for this demon that was in the house was Moloch,
Okay.
and Moloch is a uh,
Yes.
biblical character, demon that was the god of the Canaanites.
Yes.
The Canaanites and their whole deal was young baby boys,
Right.
killing
Right.
baby boys, yeah, infants.
Right. And if you the I believe the part of the Moloch or anything, it originated with the people, the Carthaginians,
The
where
Canaanites, yeah. Prior to
and
that,
they if you read them, because you think that some of these families, believe it or not, were well off, and they would, to assure themselves their continued standing or whatever you want to call it in the community, they would give up their own young to be sacrificed. In other
yes,
words, this was not we're going to take the kid from you. They were willingly giving them the children up for that,
yep,
which is this is like that's horrible.
yep.
It's horrible, but yes, right. And one time they were looking at it from an anthropological, like, oh, was the when they were doing this, were they going through some type of famine, or they were um like a version of population control. Was this the reason why they were doing this? And they were saying no, that at that time, the populace of the city, first of all, the city, everything, it was doing well economically. There was enough food. This was not like, hey, we're suffering because don't have enough food, and this is an indirect way of population control. That wasn't none of those motivators were there. This was strictly, you know, blood ceremony. In other words,
Well, you know that I'm sure you're familiar with orbs.
yes,
Orbs that generally can be seen. They can't always be seen by the naked eye, but they can always be seen in pictures. You can be standing, right in front of an orb and not see it, but hold a
yes,
camera up and you'll see it clearly. Our
yes,
our mind, for whatever reason, can't process it. Um, Animals can see them, but we can't.
hmm,
But you can take pictures. It's amazing. You can go on the battlefield of Gettysburg at night and take a series of pictures, and you wouldn't believe how many orbs you'll see.
yes,
But
yes.
nonetheless, um, there's a picture in my book. The final scene, the final confrontation with the demon was in a room in the basement that was once used to store coal. These old
Okay,
houses burned coal, and it was
okay,
the coal storage room. And that's where the final confrontation took place. And I took a picture of this room for the book just to represent it. And I said, this is the room where it happened. Well, when
okay.
I got the picture, and you can actually see this in the book. Remember the Lawrence Welk show?
Yes,
Remember all the
my
little
grandparents used
bubbles,
to watch that Lawrence Welk and be like, "Oh
all
my
the little
God."
bubbles that would be going?
Yes, yes,
Well, that
yes.
room looked like the Lawrence Welk show. It was filled
Wow.
with hundreds of little tiny orbs that represent, I believe, all the children that were killed in the house.
Wow. That's
All
wow.
the children that were killed in the house. It
Here,
was
let me.
used as used as an illicit, illegal abortion clinic for a long time,
Yes,
and
I
the babies would be burned in the furnace in the
to
basement.
get rid of
Yeah.
the proof of the. Yeah, as a matter
So
of
I
fact,
believe all those little souls, all those little orbs were still trapped there in the house.
let me see. I wanted to so I could show that there. Bob, this is the cover of the book. All right. I'm showing right now what's up. This is
So there are
this is
pictures
the
in the
art.
book.
Right, that
I,
I was gonna say. You have actual pictures in the book.
yeah, there are pictures in the book, and one of them show you can look closely and see the orbs on the picture.
Okay. All right.
For those that maybe want to buy the book and read it.
Right. Well, by the way, let me tell you something. You've got about almost 1,000. You've got almost 5 star, 4.99 feedback, 4.3 out of almost 1,000 um, reviews on it. Okay, which is great.
Oh, on the book.
Yes, on the book, on the
Oh
book.
yeah,
I
it's
mean, as far as the what however you end up feeling about it, yeah, yeah, I can tell. 330 pages. This is on the Kindle edition. Yes. So the let me ask you, and have you had any guests that have had not because they were looking for it, not because they did anything. Have you had any guests that have had any
no,
experiences?
no.
Okay.
Um, it's funny. Just so you brought that up, just this weekend, I had a woman who came here from another state, whose
Mm-hmm.
daughter lives locally, and the house is very well known locally. It got so much
Sure.
publicity. It's like
Right.
the Amityville Horror House. So I don't even know what this is. She goes, "Oh, I brought a spirit box with me." I don't know what a
Oh,
spirit box is.
oh, no, 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 no.
Yeah, and she said, "Oh, I tried to communicate." I said, "Please, please don't do anything like that here. Please take it away. Don't do that here. Don't do it. And she said, "Oh, I didn't. They think it's some kind of game.
Yes, exactly.
They think
Exactly.
it's some kind of
Exactly.
game, like they're playing a game." And I said, "Please, please don't do anything like that here. Don't do it." So hopefully she didn't.
I was gonna say, yeah, no, I know some people they want to. I've mentioned that there's people sometimes that want to have that aha moment that these people that join these paranormal teams because they want to have they see the reality shows and they want to have and then every once in a while, be careful what you wish for. Then
Yeah,
they
that's right.
then they get the full Monty and then they're like, ah, ah. So
Yeah, and it'll absolutely freak them out.
yes, I tell everybody, I was a practicing hypnotherapist for many years and had people that had different experiences with things that they had seen or witnessed that they would call me and on more than one occasion. Well, for anxiety and lack of sleep. And I had one gentleman one time, among others, tell me, "Can you hypnotize me to forget this, that I saw this?" I said, "No, I can't. I can't. I can help you remember stuff if you know what it is." Sometimes I had people that put stuff away really, really well, and they just couldn't remember. I
Hmm.
said, "No, I can't do that." And then I would tell them, "But what's going on? Tell me. What would make you want to do that?" And because people want to go back to that moment before they witness something, because their world changes. That experience or what they witness is like a marker in their life. Everything that the AD, the BC to the AD, this is like before that event, whatever it was, either the experience or they witnessed it or something. Their understanding of the world changes, and they want to go back to what they were, but you can't unsee what you see. So I had, you know, throughout the time for different reasons, people coming to me with predicaments, mostly, high anxiety, God's lack of sleep, wanting to sleep, couldn't stay asleep, you name it, So I understand that sometimes people they don't know what they're asking for when they do stuff like that. What they're opening, the because they get caught up again with reality shows and movies and they think, oh, it's like, you know what? Tell you what the difference is. When you go to the movies, at the end the credits roll and you get up and you go home. But it's not at your house. Everything
No.
changes when it's at your house. Like what you just explained, how things sometimes, the next thing you know, you're experiencing things at the house, and
See, the
then
one
things
thing I
change.
do, and I still about once a year I have what's a preventive maintenance that I do.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Sure.
about a 2 hour long ritualistic blessing that I go through.
Yes.
That I know how to do. I know what to do.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of puts a lid on anything that may
Sure.
show up
Sure.
again.
Just in case you got people like that going in there,
Absolutely, yeah.
and she kind of blabbed about it, you know.
Well, apparently she got a name through this box.
Who?
And she gave me the name, and I said, "I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know a name like that. I have no idea. And please, I don't do that here. Do
Okay.
not do that here.
Yeah,
It's dangerous."
her curiosity, she had to give you that name just to see if you would react and say, "Hey,
Yeah, no,
did you really not recognize the thing?"
no, I did not. I
Oh,
had
okay.
no
I
idea.
was just
Oh,
Bob is like going, "No, never heard of that." And but yes,
if I looked into it in detail, maybe I could have found
no, no, no. I'm
something.
just
But
no, don't do that. Don't do it.
yeah,
But
I'm not
but
worried
I'm
about
just saying that some of these people, like I said, they get caught up with the I don't know, the sensationalism when they see these shows, and then they do stuff. And maybe in this case, this lady mentioned that she was gonna do this with a ghost box.
it.
That afterwards they are like, uh,
Yeah, yeah.
again because
Some of the stuff that you experience, it's amazing. I mean, what some of the things I went through. One time I woke up in bed at night. I was completely turned around in bed. My feet were on my pillow and my head was at the base of the bed. My wife was still
okay,
in bed normally. I woke
okay,
up backward. I had not gotten up. I don't sleepwalk. I didn't get up and
mm-hmm,
go to the bathroom and come back and get in. No, I woke up. It would do things like that to me on purpose to
right.
to to like try to unsettle me.
Sure, of course.
Yep.
And that's the thing, people don't realize that contrary to sometimes, and I'm sure you're gonna, God knows you know better than anybody else, Bob, that everybody, like I said, looks at the movies and they think it's just stuff flying, and basically the attack sometimes is on a psychological level, okay, where it did stuff like that. You would think, well, so you woke up with your feet on the pillow and but when you start putting all these things together, little by little,
I don't even talk about the scratches and the bites and
right?
all the things that
Yeah,
physical things and falling down the steps and you know it pushes down the steps and you end up at the bottom of the steps. That happened on a regular basis.
right. And also, I'm glad you mentioned, because another thing that I want to say is misleading. That a lot of people think that when you get, let's say, whether it's a group or a religious, clergy or whatever, whether it's a deliverance minister or a priest, that they come and clap a thunder and it's over. They cleansed your house and that's it. And I beg to differ, and you
Yeah.
confirmed that even after that, you still got to keep working at it.
Oh, it's I had a post-traumatic stress condition that lasted for years
I'm not surprised.
after that.
I'm
I
not
mean,
surprised.
and uh,
That's incredible. But as a matter of fact, I see why you would have.
every
Um,
little thing that happened, and when you're sitting there and you see stuff flying across the room right in front of you, you know,
sure.
things would fly. I'd be talking to my wife and something would fly across the room. I'd just go pick it up and put it back where it was, like it didn't even happen, you know.
Yeah, after a while, it just becomes like, you get
I we,
desensitized to like,
we wouldn't let it get us because it was designed to like freak us out. It was designed to have an effect. And then we finally got to the point where we laughed at it. We
there you
laughed at
go.
it.
You laughed at it.
And one
Yes.
time I talk in the book where I had a white shirt that I'd worn to work and I put it on the clothes tree and I came up and there was a streak of blood that was
Okay.
down the back of the shirt, a streak of
Okay.
blood.
Okay.
And I hadn't bled or anything. I mean, the thing had
Mm-hmm.
covered all the walls in the house with this blood. And I said, "What did you do that for?" I scolded.
Right.
Why did you do that? Put it somewhere. What you put it on the shirt. Now that doesn't impress me. You have to understand. I'm not frightened. It doesn't impress me. I'm angry. Don't
Right.
mess with I still have the shirt and the blood's still on it.
Right. Exactly. But exactly. And believe it or not, that change in your reaction was crucial. Because instead of
Yeah,
wigging out like, oh my God, now I got it's like,
it's like
really,
don't do that. Don't
yeah.
do that.
Like when you got a dog that peed on your furniture and you're like, why did you do that? That kind of that
That's
kind
right.
of deal. Like, okay, exactly, exactly.
The
And
thing
that,
goes
believe
and
it or not, that right
cowers in the
there,
corner.
yeah, yeah, no, it's like, you're making, you're inconveniencing me. You're not scaring me. It's just inconvenient.
Yeah.
And that counts for a lot, believe it or not, as far as so are you going to write another book? Because you wrote that
You
book,
know,
what, 12
it
years
was
ago?
so much work. That book was a lot of work to write that
Okay.
book. And my mission in doing it
Mm-hmm.
was to tell the story and to
Right.
tell it in a way that it's like a ministry. It's a
Yeah.
sermon. It's a life-changing, it has a message to it that really
Okay.
can impact somebody's soul.
Okay.
And that's what I wanted. So all the interviews and all the videos that have been made and the television programs that have been made, and hopefully at some point there's a movie. I had a movie
Mm-hmm.
deal once, and COVID came along and killed it, which I'm
Wow.
not surprised.
Well, that was
But
not too long ago, though.
yeah, yeah. Anyway, I believe the message of the book is something that tens of thousands of people have read the book,
Mm-hmm.
and that message has is being perpetuated and spread, and hopefully it continues to be. It's been over 10 years since I published it, and the book still sells very well. And to
Yes.
me, It's kind of like preaching a sermon where I'm not there, but tens of
Right.
thousands of people. And a lot of people read it that don't even go to church and
Oh no, that's what I'm saying. I'm
would
sure
never hear that message.
they look at it for they purchase it for the scare factor
Yeah, and
originally.
they get a message of the supernatural and of God through it. So I just feel that's why I encountered so much difficulty in succeeding to get it published, and evil did not want it to be published because I believe it demonstrates that evil is true.
But
It's
what
all
happened
true.
when, first of all, did you run, I know that you ran into problems, you're saying, when you were writing it,
Yes.
okay? As I know sometimes what they say, life gets in the way, but what kind of experiences did you have that you're like, oh, come on, now you're messing with me?
Um, I guess it was in the process of understanding the publishing business. It was really
Okay.
before the whole thing of self-publishing and
Yes,
everything.
right.
I had to deal with getting an agent and getting a publisher. Now, ultimately, Penguin Random
Okay.
House published it, one of the
Okay.
best, biggest publishing houses there is.
Yes.
Um, but to get into that world, if you're not a notable celebrity who they say, why don't you write a book and we'll have someone write it for you and put
Right.
your name on it and we'll make a lot of money, Hillary
Yes.
Clinton or something like
Yeah,
that.
the ghostwriters. Yeah,
Yeah.
they get a ghostwriter to do it
So
for you.
I thought I had to have a ghostwriter that understood how to do that. And I
Mm-hmm.
wrote the manuscript, and I had this ghostwriter write a book from my manuscript. So I went through three different ghostwriters. One of them, the first one, was very, very successful, and I believe could have done the job, but got so sick in trying to work on my book, finally said, I don't want anything to do with this book.
Ah, there we go. That's where I'm
And
going for.
finally, I came across a woman uh, who was very difficult to work with, who didn't write a book, um, who used my manuscript. My manuscript was fine; it was published. What
Okay.
I wrote was published. But what she did do was get me into the publishing world and get me a good agent who got me
Okay.
the publishing deal.
Okay.
And so it was a lot of difficulty in making all that happen, and I could just go on and on about all the challenges I had to overcome to get it done. But it finally came out, and I think it's very, very well written. I worked with a really good editor at Penguin, um,
Mm-hmm.
who kind of didn't rewrite it, but took it and rearranged it and changed the flow of it and expanded some of it and suppressed other parts of it, and I think made the story just perfect. And she and
Right.
I worked together very closely, and it ended up good. It's a very interesting book. A lot of folks tell me they'll read it almost straight through without.
Right. And let me tell you something. As a reader, I can tell you that's how you're reading a good book when it's like, oh, you know, I can't, I'm not, I gotta finish reading this. It's 3 in the morning and you're still like,
I can't stop reading it. Yeah, and
but you
I don't.
can,
I'm not saying that boastfully. I'm saying I hear that
mm,
all the
yeah.
time.
There's like, no, man, I can't put this down. It's like tomorrow I'll be like, but I got,
I about a year or so ago, 2 years ago, there was a guy who they make a lot of movies in Pittsburgh, and
Mhm.
this is a famous house, and it's an old Victorian manor, beautiful place, especially it's a bed and breakfast. And he shows up at my house one day and says, "Listen, I scout for movies, and do you mind if I took some pictures of the inside of the house? We might want to use it in a movie
Okay.
sometime." We'll catalog it and keep it on file. I said, sure, come on in. Yeah, take all the pictures you want. So he was there for about an hour, took all the pictures, and we talked. He was a nice guy. And as he was leaving, just for the heck of it, I said, hey, I never mentioned anything about the book or the house or anything. I said, hey, I wrote a book about this house. Let me give you a copy. He goes, "You wrote a book about it. What's it about?" I said, "Just take it." And he left.
Okay.
So about a year later, I get a call. I didn't remember his name or anything. He said, "Hey, remember I'm such and such? I came to your house one day to take pictures." I said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, you gave me a book when I left, and I didn't pay any attention to it. And a couple of weeks ago, I found it in my office, and I just started reading the first couple pages, and I couldn't put it down." And he said, "And I finished it here recently, and I had to call you and tell you that this book has changed my whole perspective on life.
Wow.
I didn't have any faith. I had no religion before I read this book. And I'll tell you what, this has really kind of messed me up."
Does a number on your head, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the
And,
thing.
and those are the kind of conversations that say I hit the mark,
Right.
hit the mark that I was aiming for.
The reason why I asked you this, there was a doctor, his name was Earl Patterson. Okay. Now, Dr. Patterson, I want to, was it in Pennsylvania? No, or New Jersey. I'm sorry. He oversaw a couple of asylums for the community, for the county or something like that. He ran like the mental health. This was
Yeah,
back in the
sure.
50s,
State
something.
hospitals.
Right.
Yeah.
Like in the early, I want to say he did all the way into the 60s. He decides, like in the early 70s, he's going to put a stories together documenting cases of possession that he ran across when he was doing this as a psychiatrist. Even though he was running this, goes on, like I want to say 1979, runs it, goes through three different typists, or they would all get sick. Well, a couple of them, as I guess he's dictating and they're putting it together. One like wigged out so badly, she's like, "I'm quit. I'm out of here."
I can't
This
do it. Yeah.
because basically what he's describing are cases. These are real life cases that he came across in his career while he's doing this. All right. I think a couple of them, until the last one that finished, got violently ill. Like they like sick, like not like I'll be next week. It's like I'm so sick I don't know when I can come back and finish this for you. Finally, he got that done. Then he goes on the hunt, same thing, for a publisher. Couldn't find one. Finally, finds one in California. Can't remember what the name of the publishing house was. Bottom line, the books never got published. I myself tried looking up this publishing house. Never, couldn't find it. Couldn't find it anywhere. Nowhere. Okay. Same, it sounds a lot like what you were talking about. Like something does not want this information out there.
Oh yeah, it was. I mean, what I went through, and as I said, the first writer, who was a very, very successful writer, had a number of books. I remember talking to her husband on the phone. He said she's in the hospital. We don't know what's wrong with her. We don't know
Well,
what's wrong. And she finally said, "I can't deal with this. I
well,
can't deal with it." One of the priests from my book actually went to her house. She lived in New Rochelle, New York,
hmm
and then she walked away from it, and I don't blame her. And
let me tell you, the what I remembered was that he mentioned, because that when he says when he was trying to find a publishing house, he says this was the early mid 70s. You remember when all these movies that came out, The Exorcist, The
yes,
Omen, all that crap. And they were turning him away to listen to this because he says you're going to scare people away from demonic themes. In other words, they were trying to they wanted to scare people but attract them at the same time. But if you're going to put a story, what you're writing is not fiction, it's nonfiction. And you're talking about the dangers and also what you ran across as you did all these cases for so many years. Like, in other words, we don't want that slant.
yeah, that's like it sounds like the book. It's called Hostage to the Devil.
Oh, yeah. Now, Hostage to the Devil, if you read Hostage to the Devil, it's like, "Rrr." Dr.
Yeah,
Malachi Martin. Yes,
yeah,
that's, and then, but besides the fact that he's a very good writer as far as descriptions go and the content, and you're thinking, okay, this is, it's an exorcist who wrote it, even though the exorcists in the book themselves are not him supposedly. But yeah, when you read that, you're like, oh, and it's, and you know what, Bob? When you read Hostage to the Devil, you realize that a lot of these cases are very convoluted. It's not like what you see, like it's all very open and shut, and you know what it is right away, and everything happens, and
Yeah, these people, it's
2 hours
very, very
later the
true.
story's it's like, no, 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 no.
Yeah.
So yeah. So when you said that, when you're saying, "Oh, I'm having all these uphill battles coming up and down," I was like, "Oh, I've heard a version of this before," and it hasn't been to be kind of in the same vein, not exactly, but it talked about the same subject matter where and I tried myself to look for a copy of that book or volumes. He was going to have 10 volumes on it. That's how many cases he had. I've
Wow.
never been able to locate them. And I have searches out there. Let me tell you something. I can usually find books wherever they are. And I've never been able to find them. Like I said, I even tried finding the publishing house. I said, well, maybe I can trace it back through the publishing house. Nope, 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 nope. No luck
Wow.
there. Like whenever that buried that thing, it was like, it's gone. So the reason why I asked it about this is like, like I said, the aftermath of everything that you went through. All right, because
Yeah, it's not over yet, too. It's not over yet. I just want
you,
peace. I want some peace.
I
And
I I've had I had clients where I've said it before in all my other shows that their answer to their problems when they actually, and I'm not talking anything demonic. I'm just talking your regular old dead person. When they had some type of haunting, their solution was, we're moving. If they could financially swing it, whether it's because they owned the property or it was a rental or something, because a lot of times, because I used to be a freelance investigator for a foundation that was here in Florida. We always leave the door if you need help, let us know, call us back, whatever you want, and sometimes we would follow up. I would say about 80% of the time, people's solution to this was, we're moving. So that's why I'm saying your perspective is unique after being there so many years.
I couldn't do that to someone else. It was my problem. And I really believe that I was in some way guided there and destined to deal with this issue that
Okay.
would later get great publicity. And
Okay.
I was molded and shaped in a way, my personality, to
Hmm.
go through it. Um, and it was a mission that I had to fulfill. And also just the doggedness and the determination, and also the ability that I was given to
Hmm.
write, to be a good writer,
Right.
and to be able to write a fairly complicated story in a way that was interesting. I think I was just put together in a certain way to go through this experience and to document it, and it would be the capstone of my life. And I've experienced a lot of difficulty since it. Lost a marriage, lost really two marriages. I had a son who died in the process. It's been rough, and but nonetheless, I think the story is still a very valid one, and it has the ability to change people and to give them truth. And if that's the meaning of my life and my struggles, then it was well worth it.
Bob, have you ever considered that you being there, you got in the way of maybe somebody else who was going to own that house, which would have amplified it?
That could have happened. I don't know. I really believe, if again, I went to great lengths in the book to explain all of this, and I really
Okay.
believe that I was destined um, from a young child to live in that house and to deal with this
Right,
problem.
because you even as a child, you were attracted to this house,
Exactly.
right?
And this problem existed for decades. It affected the whole community.
Okay.
It affected the whole community. And I think that I was drawn to it from the time I was a child and would stand in front of the house as a 7-year old and stare at it, and it would stare back at me. Um,
That's incredible. That's,
yeah,
you know
and,
what, and a
and
lot of people, yeah.
and the
Yeah.
fact that when I left the military and came home and we were looking for a house, and my mother said to me, just all out of hand. Oh, by the way, your house is going on the market next
She
week.
called it your house, huh?
She called it my house. And when she said it, I knew what house she was talking about.
Right, exactly.
Your house is
Exactly.
going on the market next week. Isn't that a coincidence? So I right away thought this is no coincidence. This house is destined to be my
Yeah.
house. It's
Yeah.
been my house all my life, and
Right.
I'm going to get it, and I'm going to finally go inside it and look at it, and I did, and thus the story began.
Right, because from what I understand, you kind of like thought you weren't going to get it, and you even offered a lower price than that they were asking, and they took it, right?
Right away. Right away.
And you're like, whoa! Yeah. Again, Bob, thank you so much. It has
Yep.
been wonderful to speak to you. I'm going to put a link to your website in the credits of the show. Because it's not only the book, it's that, if anybody wants to stay there and
Oh
enjoy the
yeah, yeah.
B&B.
And there's a website for the book too, demonofbrownsville.com.
Okay. All right, but just be, and I know you said, because I did look at your website, and I know that you put on the website for the B&B, no, 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 don't come, no,
No
trying to
ghost hunters.
do, no ghost hunters, no ghost
Yeah,
hunters.
I'll
So
talk to people about the book, but you're not coming with any EVP meters or anything.
I don't blame you. I don't blame you at all. Bob, it has been absolutely wonderful. And for the podcast listeners, what would be the best website to find out, about the B&B or the book,
Well,
whichever.
the B&B is called the Brownsville Roadhouse.
Okay.
The Brownsville Roadhouse. The book is called The Demon of Brownsville Road, and the picture of the house is on the front cover. And then the website is called demonofbrownsville.com.
Okay. All right. So, like I said, I'll put a link again.
And then I have a Facebook page too, Brownsville
Oh, okay.
Roadhouse,
You
which is
do?
all about the
Okay.
bed and breakfast.
Right, right, right. That as far as let me ask you, talk, how many rooms does it have? Tell me about the B&B now. Let's move a little bit off to the
Yeah, I mean, it's not a real big mansion. I mean,
mm-hmm.
I have a two-room suite with two queen beds. I have two other rooms with queen beds, and then there's a third floor apartment that's a living room, dining room, kitchen, bedroom that I generally let out. I've just started letting it out for an extended period of time. You can rent it for a week or for a month.
Mm-hmm.
So I have it. I have someone in there now through October.
Okay. Wow.
So
All right.
and it's a really high end place. I mean, it's a
Okay.
very nice place to stay. So
Okay.
it's not an Airbnb. I mean, it's like a first class
Sure.
hotel,
Sure.
and very nice place to stay, and a lot of things to look at,
Okay.
like a little museum. Very nice. Everyone says how peaceful it is.
That's great.
So
Again, thank you so much, Bob.
okay, I enjoyed it a lot.
Very much so. I'll be
Okay.
bringing you back because I gotta catch up with you on more
Yeah,
stories.
that's
I don't want to let out everything about the book, but it's so interesting, and I'm sure you got a lot of stories, maybe even stuff that you didn't write about.
yeah, sure, absolutely. Okay, great.
Take
Thank you so
care.
much.
Bye bye. Okay. What do you think? By the way, there's been a lot of God going back years. There's been story shows besides the book. Um, in other words, even before he published the book, Bob appeared in different shows and documentaries. Where, in other words, this is a very well-known haunting, if you want to call it that. Um, which is, let me tell you something. In other words, when you look at the shows, it's kind of like wow. And then when you read the book, I think that's what fills in the gaps because, of course, all these shows they gloss over. Um, you know, they only have X amount of time where they can fit this information in. But it goes in. The book actually goes into a lot more detail about what transpired throughout all the years that he was living there, from the time, like he said, that he was a kid and he was perpetually attracted to this house. Let's face it, most 7-year old they don't care. In other words, there was this attraction from him. Like I'm saying, a 7-year-old kid, and he's not an architect. That's what I'm saying. It's not like I want to be an architect and that house has a design that just fascinates me. That wasn't it. Whatever there was about this house reached out to him even as a child, which is not, that's normally kids, like I said, don't have any preference that way. And again, the coincidences, or whether you want to call them synchronicities, where he, right at the appropriate time that he's able to buy the house, he has a family, he's married, it comes up for sale. And by the way, because I'm not going to give the entire book away, it's a 300 and something page book. There's a lot. I'm not going to give everything away, but he really thought that because this is a large house, he really thought that it was going to be beyond their means to purchase this house. It's like, yeah, it's great, it's for sale, but yeah, good luck on getting it. And it turned out, yeah, he got it. He made an offer to the owner, and the guy said, yeah. And like everything else, um, and I remembered one time, and it's not the same thing. It's not paranormal, but I'm saying that sometimes, you want to and I'm going to use the example of a house that you throw it out there and you're thinking, well, what's the worst thing can happen? I'm going to get the big fat no that I already know is probably coming my way. And same thing. This was many, many years ago. It was in the 80s. And we were going out there. This was the edge of Miami. They were building a lot of brand new houses out. We were like right on top of the Everglades. This was in the middle of nowhere. When I mean nowhere, like out there was basically you were surrounded by agricultural fields, and they had this. And we were debating, did we want to go and get something new built? Because we had already gone through that new, where it takes them forever, 6 months, 7 months, 8 months to deliver a house. When you order it being built versus something that was already built. So we were going back and forth, like, and right next to the new development that the house would have had to be built, they had a new one, but the house was built. And it was a 3 bedroom, 2 bath, one car garage, which is all we needed. And I remember they were asking, I can't remember something. And we were like, hey, you know what? We'll offer this person. And I remember I spoke to the real estate agent for the lady. It was a lady. I don't know if she had other people. I don't know. And we offered her like, it wasn't that much. It was like way, but under her asking price. In other words, she had been in that house, I want to say a year or less or something very small. In other words, she had her margin of profit on this house. I'm sure as a matter of fact, probably when she paid her commissions on the real estate deal, she was probably going to be in the hole. How's that? So we offered her a lot less, not a lot, but less than what she was asking for. So much so that even the real estate agent says, I don't think he's going to go for this. And I said, well, offer it to her because, real estate agents have to. The real estate agent calls us back and she goes, she'll take it. And we're like, huh? Because honestly, we thought we were going to get laughed because, like I said, we were kind of teetery-tottering whether we wanted a house built or a new one. Come to find out, I asked the real estate agent, I said, that's great, but what's going on with this? Like, something wrong with the house? Same thing, like, she goes, well, no, what happened was, I don't remember, she said a few months before, like I said, she hadn't been in that house. Somebody had tried to break into the house, and I think she was in the house. Okay. And this scared her so badly that somebody was trying to break into the house that she just wanted out of the house. Out of the house. Like, in other words, this lady didn't care if she was going to take a loss on it, if she was going to be in the hole. And I said, well, let me think about it. And then at that time, me and my husband, we talked about it and we decided, no, we're going to get a brand new house, but we'll go through the pain of that. As a matter of fact, we had to end up renting another house for a whole year. What it ended up being a year instead of 6 months, which is what they told us while the other house was getting built. All right. And I never forgot that. My point being this description that Bob gives where he's throwing this thing out, thinking, well, they're probably going to laugh me and my wife out the front door. And they took it. And the thing is this, that you're so excited, I imagine. That's just me making things up, but I imagine that here you're actually going to get what you want, that maybe you don't think twice, like, why is that? You know, you're because in the book it was a significant amount of money, the difference between what these owners were asking and what they offered them. All right, almost like you're thinking, what, like exactly like what he's that he asked the owner what's wrong, and the owner is telling him, "Yeah, we've held mass twice in the house," which by the way is an unusual kind of thing. Like because you're thinking mass, like what would you? A blessing is we're talking that's very typical, among Catholics. You move into a new house and you ask the parish priest or somebody to come and do a blessing on the house. That's different. But again, you get, you know, it's almost like, relationship. You meet the bad boy or the bad girl and you're so, and then you overlook all the warning signs like, oh, this is not going to be good. Same thing, you're excited, you get the property you want, and then, you have all these little signs along the way, giving you a heads up, and you're like, I'm not going to ignore that. I'm going to ignore that. No, that doesn't mean anything. Later on, you realize, oh, shoot, that's why I was being told this, and that, or that's that comment, what that meant. And you know what? I'm sure there's people out there who have had similar experiences. And I'm not, I mean, I know sometimes people buy properties that later on turn out to be like, what a headache this has become. As a matter of fact, you know, because in certain, especially with real estate, certain states tell you have to disclose certain things, whether it's, for example, if it's been flooded before, the real estate agent, they must disclose this. That there's another website, and I've mentioned it before, called Died in House or Died in Home or something like that, which you plug an address and it will tell you if anybody has died in the house. Not like died, but not died in the sense of like that the owner that lived there died, but that there's been some type of crime or some type of murder or something that how's this that will stigmatize a property. And I think the reason why they do that is that you think, well, people in that city or that county or that area will be familiar, but what if you have a buyer that comes in out of state or just out of the area and they have no idea that this whatever it was played out in that house, and they buy it, and then later on they're told, yeah, that's where they murdered 5 people. What? But the other end of that is, even with hauntings, now there's certain states that require for disclosure to be done, if a house has a reputation along those lines. My point being that, remember, when they're doing this transaction is before the advent of reality shows, which I'm thinking, by the way, there's a lot of people out there, a lot of homeowners that I think they don't even call in a paranormal team or even the clergy, because they're thinking the last thing I want, like I said, their solution to the problem is I'm out of here. And the last thing I want is for somebody, I don't want anybody to think or know that we've got stuff going on here. And by the way, they don't care if whoever buys the house, you deal with it. Whatever it was that we're dealing with, you deal with it. In other words, nobody has like how Bob is saying, my conscience wouldn't let me, like, what would happen to whoever follows in especially the longer he was there, the darker it got. There's a lot of people that won't even have a paranormal investigation done on their properties because they're like, at some point in time, they come to this decision that they're out of there. And like I said, they sell the house for very little money, or maybe not as much as they could make. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes they make their money, but they're like, in other words, maybe their plans were not to move out. You know, sometimes you find it, you go into this house, a lot of nice renovations have been done to the house and I'm not talking about renovations like curb appeal, like, oh, we're going to flip the house. I'm talking about renovations that people do to their house when they're planning to stay there. And all of a sudden they're like out of there. I'm not going to say all the time, but a lot of times that is that, like in Harry Potter, that shall never be named. He who shall never. Well, this is the scenario that will never be named, which is we've got a haunting going on, and we're not going to call no paranormal team or nobody to come in here and do anything because we're out of here. Yeah, but we paid this for the marble, blah blah, and the this. I don't care. We're out of here. And that's it. That's it. And if they're real estate agents, sometimes, and like I said, it depends on on the different states have different rules. They'll just say, no, nothing's ever, this is a nice house. No, nothing's ever happened here. I mean, come on. That's why I had to laugh when he calls up the prior owner. He goes, let's get together and talk, talk about this. I was like, of course not. This man's never what? You think he's gonna disclose to you, you know, what he knew was there and he like you guys walk into it? No, not everybody's a Bob. Um, and by the way, I know that he was saying about that house was meant for him. And think about this. When they bought that house, they were like a typical family, 4 kids, like 1980s. He gets his dream house, but whatever. It's a typical family in the sense of, and then, as time goes by and all these things are occurring and they're trying to deal with it. But at the end, it's a regular family and they're fighting against it. And he asks for the help of the church or whatever the process is. You have to read the book. But can you imagine if that house would have fallen into the wrong hands? And by this, I mean somebody with a dark personality or somebody with a dark agenda or just it's like, Bob, maybe your purpose, if he listens to this, he must be going, no, that's not it. The purpose of your attraction to this house all along was that you were going to be the stopgap. You were the one that was going to prevent maybe some dark personality, um, whether it was a serial killer or just somebody that's dark or bad, or even somebody that would have been into occult, really dark occult stuff. You were the one that your presence here, even though it's cost him dearly, I think, was the one that stopped that from that house falling into the hands of somebody that was, because it sounds like, and I don't know the exact, but it sounds like the family that was there before. I don't think, I, I never got the impression. They were just, in other words, if their conscience bothered them about selling the house to somebody and not letting them out, it was like, we'll deal with it, but it's better than staying here. But I don't think they sounded like they were bad people, like nefarious or Satanists or nothing like that. There was maybe, who knows what was going on with them. But can you imagine that house falling into the wrong hands? Whoa, whoa. Okay, talk about putting gasoline on a fire. That would have amplified it, vice versa, because it would have been an exchange, fueled whatever was there and whoever came to live there, being fueled, dominated, possessed, whatever you want to call it, further, who knows, by what was there. Yeah, yes, yes, exactly. And that's what I'm talking about. Maybe he was the right person because he's the kind of person, well, obviously that he stuck it out. He stuck it out. He didn't let whatever was going on run him out. And like I said, yeah, I've read, again, I'm not going to go into it because I think the book deserves to be read. You know, the if you look at the book, the story, how's this, from the outside, you didn't think, okay, well, it's a family that moves into a house and it turns out that the house is haunted and it's haunted by a demon. Okay, yeah. But when you read the book, you realize that it's almost like a detective mystery story again, because unlike what you see in Hollywood where everything, the problem, everything resolves itself in a week, the family moves in there and then everything goes sideways and then everything happens in a week and then the priest comes, blesses it, and boop, and it's over a week later, 2 weeks. When you read the actual book, it tells you how incrementally all these different things were happening and how they were dealt with. And remember, most people that are going through these experiences, your first reaction is disbelief or, oh, my imagination's running away with me, or no, that was the wind, or no, that was, in other words, you write it off as whatever. And it's only later on th- through things happening, the repetition, and things getting that you realize, wait a minute. But that only takes time. That only takes time for it to play out that way. And let me tell you something. And the worst part is not that the house in and of itself was haunted, because like he said, like I had to laugh. When he says, oh, I went to this place and they tell me it's haunted, I was like, okay, who cares? Like, in other words, this was not a dead person, like, when you come to the realization that, like he was saying, that it's just not the haunted house for the old guy that lived here and he's still knocking around. No, 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 no. When you get to that point, that realization that whatever is there is intelligent, manipulative, and non-human. Yeah. Okay. That right there is where, you know, what is it? What's that saying? You see the differentiate from the men to the boys or whatever. It's like right there, right there. When you realize this is not like, oh, it's a haunted house where, you know, you hear like, you hear, don't get me wrong. I know there's a lot of scary things attached to just a regular old haunting, but a lot of times things of that nature are resolved more easily and completely versus what he's describing, especially when you realize what are the origins, what caused it, because you think, okay, how does this happen in a house? How does this come about? Why? And that's what he explains in the book when he starts doing his own investigations as to why this is happening in that house in particular. So, yeah, it's very, very, very interesting. So, I urge you to get the book. And like I said, I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that are familiar with Bob Cranmer's story before that. But anyway, don't forget to sign up for my newsletter on Substack. Go to mppelliser.com. I have a link there. Go to miamighostchronicles.com. I have links to everything there. Or stories of the supernatural.info. It's all, I'll just have as different tabs. You go to eerie.news. I have podcasts about that. And Stranger Than Fiction Stories. I have articles there. Just weird little articles, some older stuff. Same thing. I was reading one of the true crime. Like I said, this thing now with the DNA. As a matter of fact, I was reading today. They found this was a young guy. He was a Vietnam vet, a very young Vietnam vet. And there was, which by the way, I hadn't heard of this killer. God, Oregon and Northern California around the 70s was God almighty. It looked like it was like every serial killer came out of that area. And I noticed people going, hey. But anyway, there was a serial killer that ended up getting called the scorecard killer. And his prey, his preference were young men, young teenage boys or young men in their 20s. And he was called a scorecard killer because I believe they found where he had a list. And like everything, and I've mentioned it before, they found these remains. This was in Oregon. I think it was Highway 5. The week before, they had found some remains, and same thing. They couldn't. They put out. They didn't match any missing persons report. They tried to match him up to like, hey, does anybody know? Because I don't think he would, who this person is. I'm not sure how soon after he was dead. Because remember, the sooner they find somebody after they're deceased, the better they can do. If it's a fresh person, the sketch is very true to what they look like. Versus when it's skeletal remains or something, and then they have to like kind of guess what the person looks like. And you look at some of these sketches, especially from the 70s, they're like, God almighty, shoot. This doesn't look anything. But anyway, bottom line, nobody could match up this kid or this person. They didn't know it was a kid. They didn't know who it was. And last week or about a month ago, they finally, through DNA, they matched him up to this guy who was a Vietnam vet. And the family had lost touch with him. But they had, from what I understand, they had lost touch with him because he had been um, killed. I guess he had grown distant from his family, and I don't know what the particulars are about how that took place. So it's again, and I've mentioned it other times, like, when you're already that distant and when this person falls off the face of the earth and the family's really like left, well, this is what happened. And he was a young guy, 22 or 23. That's it, he's gone. And now they finally identified him after, was it 40 something years, that those were his remains. And down the road, the week before, they had found a victim of the same guy. I believe oh God, the gentleman. He is and I'm being nice when I say gentleman. I could call him something else, but there was got Kraft. That was his last name, Kraft. Randy Stephen Kraft, and he was an American serial killer and rapist known as the Scorecard Killer, and the Southern California Strangler, and the Freeway Killer. Wow. I didn't know he was, and he's still alive. He was born in 1945. And you know what's really funny? You take a look at his pictures of his mugshots, okay? And you know, you know how sometimes they say evil looks a certain way, and sometimes it doesn't. Let me see if I can, you guys can see this here. Okay, there you go. This guy doesn't look bad. Well, now he's old, but this is him. You see this guy walking around, and he could be your TV repairman. He could be, just he's so happy. He looks content in jail, doesn't he? All right. Look at him. I mean, this guy, he has the kind of face with that smile that you have a black robe with one of those collars, and he could pass for a priest. Anyway, yeah, they're still identifying his victims, you know. And at this point, I'm sure it doesn't really matter because I don't think he's getting out of prison anytime soon. Um, and from what they're saying, that they know of, as in technically he was found for the rape, torture, murder of at least 16 young men, but they believe that it could be as much as 60. And again, that's a guesstimate. All right, that's a guesstimate. Getting to my original point, that's a truly evil person. Now, can you imagine a craft type of person, man or woman, moving into a place, into a house like where Bob lived, with what was in there, with that entity, that demon there? Can you imagine what would have happened? And for all I know, I mean, I don't know the background, this craft. I mean, I have heard of these killers, but I didn't know that they all overlapped. Like the Golden Gate, that basically it turns out what they think are different killers, it turns out to be one. I don't know what his familial background is, his family of origin, what happened with this guy. But can you imagine somebody like that with that personality living or somehow or other acquiring, occupying a house? Oh God, that's a scary thought. Mm. So anyway, guys, again, don't forget links to everything, whether it's the video version, whether it's the podcast version of any of the shows, any of the series, including Stories of the Supernatural. You're going to find them on the website. The only advantage to that is that the podcast versions, if you want to listen to them on the browser or download the MP3 files from my website, you don't have to deal with commercial interruptions. If you go through any of the podcasts, like I'm anywhere, everywhere. I'm on Apple Podcasts, I'm on iHeartRadio, all of them. Just look for Stories of the Supernatural, Nightshade Diary, Eerie News, or Supernatural Storytime, and you're going to find me there. I got a lot of great guests. A lot of great guests coming on. New ones, and I still bring back my old guests because they still got things to talk about. Till next time, take care, and you are all wonderful.